The hardest part about saying no to it was having to explain it to my daughter.
I am not running anymore, mate. Not from the truth. Not from the silence that settled in my chest when the lights dimmed and the room turned soft around the edges. I know my time has been counting down, and I have made peace with that. I have learned to breathe through the ache and let the memories do the talking. There is fear sometimes, sure. But mostly it is gratitude for the faces that stayed, for the hands that held, for the scenes we managed to capture before the voice got thin. If this is the last doorway I step through, I want it to open onto love, the kind that lingers after the credits roll. That feeling you hear in those words is how the world remembers Val Kilmer. The bloke who made cool look, effortless and danger feel strangely tender. The kid from the stage who became Iceman in the jet wash. Doc Holliday with a lazy grin that hid a storm. Jim Morrison prowling across the mic stand like the stage was a living thing. He was impossible to pin down because he kept chasing something honest, even when the price bit back, even when the body would not play along. People remember the hits, the posters, the lines that turned into catchphrases at backyard Barbies. But underneath there was a maker and a collector, a man who filmed his life long before cameras lived in pockets, a man who kept evidence of joy and chaos and craft because he thought stories matter more when you show the seams. And that is the thread we are pulling today. Not gossip, not noise, just the map of a life that swung from thunder to quiet and somehow landed on grace. If this story has ever touched you in any way, tap the like, drop a memory below. Tell us the first time a scene of his got under your skin, because those small moments belong to you as much as to the credits. We will walk through the early days and the heat of the 90s, the detours that hurt, the homecoming that made a cinema full of strangers breathe as one. We will talk about losing and finding a voice, about friendship that outlasted the spotlight, and the way a final bow can feel gentle rather than sad. Stay with me, yeah, because the truth of Val is not a headline. It is a series of rooms where the light keeps changing. And if you listen closely, you can still hear the hum of a camera he held himself, waiting for the next frame. Val never set out to be a legend, he just wanted to tell stories that meant something. In the calm years after his Hollywood peak, he became more reflective, spending long days at his home in New Mexico, surrounded by canvases, old film reels, and the scent of desert rain. Acting had been his heartbeat, but painting began to take its place. He would sit by the window and sketch faces from memory, people he loved, characters he once embodied, each stroke of the brush a way of keeping them alive. Around that time, his health began to falter. A persistent pain in his throat turned out to be something far more serious. Treatments left him weakened, his voice fading until it was only a whisper. For someone who built an entire life around the spoken word, that silence felt like an exile. But Val was not the kind of man to surrender. Instead of disappearing, he chose to transform the silence into a new medium. He began filming again, documenting his recovery, his family, his faith, and the strange peace that came with slowing down. He wrote about love and forgiveness, about how fame had once felt like a costume that no longer fit. His days became quieter but deeper, filled with small rituals that kept him grounded. He often said that art had saved him more than medicine ever could. His children were his anchor. Jack, who had inherited his father's voice and sense of humor, became his interpreter. Mercedes brought warmth and laughter into the house, helping him navigate the hardest days. They became his link to the outside world, reading letters from fans, helping him paint, filming moments that would later appear in the documentary simply titled Val. The film was unlike anything Hollywood had produced. It wasn't polished or controlled. It was raw, made from thousands of hours of footage Val had shot throughout his life. He had filmed himself on sets, in dressing rooms at home, on the road. He had captured the chaos of youth, the loneliness of fame, and the slow acceptance of age. When audiences saw it, they weren't just watching an actor, they were witnessing a man stripping away every layer until only truth remained. The documentary revealed how much he had loved his craft, even when it broke him. It also showed his humor, his tenderness, his refusal to stop creating even when his body betrayed him. As his condition worsened, technology came to his side. A small company developed an artificial voice for him, based on recordings from his earlier films. It allowed him to speak again, to express himself, to tell his story in his own tone. For the first time in years, his children could hear their father's voice not as a memory, but as something alive. That miracle of sound became a symbol of resilience, proof that even when nature takes something away, human creativity can give part of it back. With this new voice, Val reconnected with fans, shared thoughts online, and even returned briefly to the screen. His appearance in Top Gun: Maverick was short but unforgettable. Sitting opposite Tom Cruise, his voice faint but full of emotion, the scene felt like a farewell between two friends who had flown through time itself. Audiences wept not because of nostalgia, but because of recognition. They saw a man who had given everything to art and was now at peace with the cost. Val's story stopped being about illness or fame. It became a meditation on resilience, on how beauty can still rise from brokenness. In the end, his silence was not an ending but another kind of song, one only the heart could hear. ChatGPT, Darnoy. When Val returned to the screen in Top Gun: Maverick, it was not about nostalgia or box office numbers. It was about closure. The scene between Iceman and Maverick lasted only a few minutes, but it carried decades of history in the pauses, in the way Val's eyes spoke before his voice did. The moment was filmed carefully, quietly, with the crew aware that they were capturing something sacred. Tom Cruise, his longtime friend and rival in the eyes of fans, insisted that Val's return was essential. He said the story could not move forward without him, because Iceman represented the heart of what the original film was truly about: loyalty, friendship, and the passage of time. When the two men faced each other again, one strong, one frail, it was not acting anymore. It was life paying its respect. Val's lines were few, his delivery soft, aided by the recreated voice technology, but the silence that followed those lines was thunderous. In theaters around the world, people cried not for the character, but for the man. That scene turned into a final salute, the kind of cinematic goodbye most actors never get. After Maverick, Val's health continued to fluctuate, but he seemed content. He spent more time painting, occasionally attending small exhibitions under the radar. His works were bold and strange, full of colors that clashed and blended like emotions fighting for space. Critics noticed that his art was not about beauty, but about honesty. Each canvas felt like a confession, raw and unfiltered. He often used themes of angels, deserts, and open doors, as if he was constantly exploring the threshold between worlds. Friends said that even when he was tired, his spirit was restless, still searching for new ways to speak without words. He began writing again, using dictation and the help of his children. His memoir, released a few years earlier, had already peeled back layers of his life, exposing the joy and the pain of a man who gave too much to his craft. But now his writing turned inward. He reflected on the nature of belief, on forgiveness, and on the strange grace that comes from accepting one's limits. He had grown up with a strong sense of faith, sometimes clashing with it, sometimes finding shelter in it. That faith deepened after his illness. He no longer saw it as rules or dogma, but as a quiet friendship with something larger than himself. In interviews and recorded messages, he spoke about the cost of perfectionism, how the pursuit of greatness had once blinded him to simple pleasures. He admitted that fame was intoxicating, but also corrosive, that it could turn a person into a product if they were not careful. Those words resonated with younger actors who had idolized him. Many wrote tributes saying that Val's honesty about vulnerability helped them feel less alone. He had gone from being the cool, untouchable Iceman to a mentor figure, an elder artist who reminded everyone that strength is not the absence of pain but the courage to face it. By this time, his archive of home videos had become a treasure for film historians. Universities requested access, documentaries referenced them, and fans dissected small moments, him laughing on a dusty film set, reciting poetry in a hotel room, or hugging his children between takes. Those images became proof that behind every larger-than-life role, there was a man quietly trying to make sense of his own story. He was both actor and observer, both subject and witness. What made Val special was that he never stopped learning how to live. He said once that losing his voice was a gift disguised as tragedy, because it forced him to listen more. He started noticing the way wind moved through trees, the way light shifted across a painting. He found music in silence. His days slowed to the rhythm of breathing, painting, writing, and remembering. Every visitor who came to his home described the same feeling, a calm presence, like walking into a space where noise had finally been forgiven. Toward the end, he rarely appeared in public, yet his influence rippled quietly through the industry. Actors who had once called him difficult now called him brave. Directors who had struggled with his intensity admitted they missed it. His legacy stopped being about the roles he played and became about the authenticity he demanded, not only from others, but from himself. That is why, when news of his passing reached the world, the reaction was not shock, but silence, the kind of silence filled with gratitude. People posted clips of Iceman, Doc Holliday, and Jim Morrison. But what united them all was a single thread truth. He had lived fiercely, created fearlessly, and in the end taught everyone that the real victory is not in fame or applause, but in the ability to keep creating until the final breath. His story reminds us that art is not about staying flawless. It is about daring to fall apart and still find beauty in the pieces. Val Kilmer did that. He turned pain into paint, silence into song, and memory into film. Even as time moves forward, his work continues to echo, soft but steady, like a heartbeat that refuses to fade. In every frame he left behind, there is still a spark of that boy from California who believed that imagination could heal the world. And maybe, in some quiet corner of eternity, he is still filming, still searching for that perfect light. In the years that followed, Val's story became something more than a biography. It turned into a kind of mirror for everyone who had ever lost something but still wanted to create. His journey from stardom to silence and then to spiritual rebirth fascinated people because it felt so human. There was no performance left, no spotlight or special effects, just a man stripped down to his truth. He often said that the hardest thing he ever learned was how to stay still. For most of his life, he had been chasing roles, chasing perfection, chasing some unreachable standard of greatness. Now he was learning how to be still and let the world come to him. That quiet was not emptiness. It was full of lessons. He spoke through his art, through his children, and through the film that had become his voice when his own was gone. The documentary Val continued to gather attention long after its release. People wrote online that it changed the way they looked at fame. It showed that behind the glamour, there is always a human being trying to hold on to meaning. His home videos of backstage chaos, laughter, and raw confession pulled the curtain back on the illusion of celebrity. He had captured moments that most stars would have buried: the arguments, the insecurities, the loneliness between takes. Watching it, you could feel the pulse of real life under the Hollywood glitter. He never asked for pity. He wanted understanding. That honesty became his final act of generosity. Even as his health declined, his sense of humor stayed sharp. Friends told stories of him cracking jokes with the mechanical voice, making everyone laugh even as his body weakened. He said laughter was proof that the soul could still breathe. When fans sent letters or paintings inspired by his work, he responded whenever he could, often signing with a simple heart and the words "all love." To him, that phrase summed up everything that mattered. His faith deepened, though he rarely spoke about it in public. He saw the divine not as distant, but as a companion walking beside him. He painted crosses, open skies, and faces full of light. The art exhibitions that featured his work often described them as meditations on mortality. Yet when people stood before those paintings, they felt not sorrow but warmth. Tom Cruise visited him again during those final years. They sat together for hours, no cameras, just two men who had grown old alongside each other. They talked about the early days, the competition, the crazy fame, and the peace that comes after the storm. Tom later said that Val's courage humbled him, that he had never met anyone who could face so much loss with so much grace. Other colleagues reached out too: Robert Downey Jr., Kevin Bacon, and even young actors who had grown up watching his films. They all spoke about how Val's vulnerability had changed them. He had become a quiet mentor, not through lectures, but through the way he lived. There were days when pain kept him in bed, but he never stopped dreaming. He planned new art installations, wrote notes for future film ideas, and kept editing the footage from his archives. He wanted his life to be seen, not as a tragedy, but as a mosaic. Each fragment, whether bright or dark, belonged to the same picture. He believed that when people looked back at his journey, they would see that imperfection was the real beauty. When he finally passed, the world reacted with a mix of sorrow and gratitude. News outlets spoke of the Hollywood rebel who became a symbol of endurance. Fans left flowers outside theaters where Top Gun and The Doors had once played. Social media flooded with clips of his famous lines, but the ones that spread the most were not the loud, heroic ones. They were the quiet smiles, the soft glances, the unspoken moments that now carried deeper meaning. Tom Cruise delivered a heartfelt tribute at a film event, asking for a minute of silence before saying simply, "Thank you, Iceman." The crowd stood, some crying, some smiling, all aware that they were honoring not just a performer, but a soul who had shared everything he had. After his passing, his family released a statement that reflected exactly who he was. It spoke of love, gratitude, and the wish that people remember him through creativity. They said that Val believed art was eternal because it carried the fingerprint of the human heart. His children later curated an exhibition combining his paintings, handwritten notes, and video clips from his archives. Visitors described it as walking through a diary written in color and light. Each corner told a different story: the ambition of youth, the loneliness of fame, the serenity of surrender. It was a celebration of life, not an obituary. Val Kilmer left behind more than films. He left behind a lesson on how to live honestly. He showed that even when the world takes your voice, you can still speak through truth. His silence became louder than any line he had ever delivered. His art reminded people that pain can transform, that love can survive illness, and that purpose can outlast the body. Somewhere in that desert house of his, filled with canvases and sunlight, there is still a camera resting on a shelf, waiting for him to pick it up again. Maybe that is how he wanted us to remember him, not frozen in time, but forever in motion, still reaching for one more frame of light. When people speak of Val now, they rarely talk about box office numbers or awards. They talk about presence. There was something in the way he looked at the world that made even ordinary moments feel cinematic. His story reminds us that greatness is not about being untouchable, but about being unafraid to be real. In an industry built on illusion, Val stood for honesty, even when it cost him roles, money, or reputation. He had lived long enough to see the full circle of fame, from blinding adoration to the quiet dignity of being remembered for something deeper. His life was a lesson in resilience, in how to keep creating when everything else falls apart. The world is full of actors who chase immortality through fame. Val chased it through authenticity. That is why, even after his passing, his name carries warmth instead of distance. Young artists studying at film schools still watch his performances, not to copy his technique, but to feel his conviction. In every scene, you can sense that he believed what he was saying. Whether as Doc Holliday whispering a line with half a smile, or as Iceman standing proud beside Maverick, there was truth beneath the surface. It is that truth that keeps his legacy alive. The documentary he left behind continues to inspire people dealing with illness, grief, and creative doubt. They see in him a reflection of themselves, someone who lost everything that once defined him and still found meaning in the ruins. His children keep his studio open, not as a museum but as a living space where artists can come to paint, record, and breathe. They say it was his wish that art never stop moving, that it keeps changing hands like a shared flame. There is something poetic in how Val's final years unfolded. He began as a man of words and ended as a man of silence, yet somehow he said more in that silence than in all his dialogue combined. He turned pain into purpose, solitude into peace, and memory into creation. Even now, when fans rewatch his films, they notice small details they had missed before a glance, a hesitation, a flicker of emotion that feels like a secret message. It is as if Val left pieces of himself scattered through his characters, waiting to be found. For those who loved him, the loss will always ache, but it comes with gratitude. Because for a while, he let the world see what it means to live honestly, to laugh loudly, to make mistakes, to believe in art, and to forgive life for being imperfect. His story ends where it began, with a man holding a camera, chasing light, searching for meaning in every frame. And maybe that is the truest legacy of all, to keep looking for beauty, even when the world goes quiet. Sometimes, late at night, when the wind moves softly through the gum trees, you can almost imagine Val out there somewhere, camera in hand, chasing one last beam of light across the horizon. He always said that the lens was his way of praying, that when he filmed, he felt closest to something sacred. Maybe that's why his work still feels alive, because it came from that quiet place inside him that never stopped believing in wonder. His story doesn't end with his passing, not really. It keeps unfolding in the people who found courage through him, in the fans who still whisper his lines, in the young dreamers who look at his journey and realize that art is just another word for hope. In every frame he left, there's a trace of that hope. The laughter between takes, the sweat on his brow under the stage lights, the gentle way he looked at his co-stars, all of it remains. Time will keep moving, films will age, but that truth doesn't fade. Because Val never played heroes to impress, he played them to understand the fragile heartbeat behind them. And when life took his voice, he showed us something even stronger, that silence can speak louder than words. If you stand still long enough and listen, you can almost hear him breathe through the stories he left behind. Not as an echo, but as a reminder that we're all just passing through, trying to make something beautiful before the light changes. Maybe that's what he wanted for all of us: to live bravely, to forgive easily, to keep creating even when it hurts. In the end, Val Kilmer didn't just act, he lived like every moment was a scene worth remembering. So when you watch his films again, take a breath and let it linger. That warmth you feel, that ache in your chest, that's him. Still here, still shining somewhere beyond the frame, teaching us that the truest art is to love, to endure, and to let go with grace.